Pokemon community, and welcome to the introductory episode of Soundproof, a new Pokemon podcast being launched by myself, Mr. BDog46, Brendan Lewis, and my good friend Jake Major Bowman Muller, who is with me today.
Hello.
We are just so unbelievably excited to finally bring this podcast to you guys. And if you follow us on Twitter, which you should at this point, you'd know that this is a project that we've really wanted to do for quite a long time, and for one reason or another haven't really been able to get it off the ground. But here it is, our first episode, and we've Jake, we talk a lot during the day, and we've been kind of just like typing the letter A lot to each other over the course of the last week, just to kind of express our excitement. So we're here, and we're really excited about it.
Like you say, we've been thinking about doing this for a long time, and when we finally kind of decided to pull the trigger, we started getting all the resources together. We started thinking about what we were going to talk about, who we were going to talk with, all the different logistics I had to go into it, making all the different accounts on different sites and all that stuff. It finally felt real. This is something we had both been thinking about doing and wanting to do for so long, and now it's happening, and we're here and we're talking, and hopefully people are listening.
Hopefully. And if you've made it this far already, thanks so much for tuning in, and we hope that you'll stick around for the rest of this episode, and
we'll
hopefully
see you
for
next time.
The rest of our episodes. All right, so real quick, we're just going to kind of talk about who each of us are, and we're going to try and make this as brief as possible because I know that's not why you're here. So, of course, my name is Brendan Lewis. I go by Mr. BDog46 online. And I'm kind of most known in the community at this point as a caster, as is Jake, where we both, do a lot of work for Critical Hit, which is probably the biggest and most influential grassroots stream right now. So that's where we are. And of course, I also am a player, contrary to popular belief. I've done pretty well at my last few events, so please take me seriously. It makes me sad. It makes me really sad. And in real life situations, I am a doctor of physical therapy. I work at a skilled nursing home. I walk Russians most of the day. That's kind of what I do for a living. And Jake, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, you walk your Russians. I'm usually sitting at a computer trying to code something. I am a master's student in atmospheric science. I'll be finishing my master's in about a year or so, hopefully, and then moving on to a PhD. As far as Pokemon goes, I've been playing since 2013. Had some pretty good results, I like to think. I won the biggest online tournament in a long time. Hold that record for a little bit. I think a couple Smogon tournaments have passed it, but I still like to say that to people who want to know and also don't care.
I won't question you on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to fact check that. I'm also the tier leader of Doubles OU on Smogon and a super moderator there, so I really enjoy competitive Pokemon, whether it be VGC or Doubles OU or any other Smogon formats. I'm pretty knowledgeable about some of those, not all of them. I've tried to dabble in singles, not done too well so far, but for the most part, I got my start in VGC. I love VGC. I love playing. I love commentating, like Brendan said. I've jumped behind the desk at a few regionals now, hopefully some more in the future, but that's pretty much it. We're both kind of just Pokemon nerds that love talking about it, so that's kind of why we decided to start this podcast.
Yeah, I guess that's really what sums it up, is that we feel strongly enough about this game and about this community that hopefully we can create some content that is, contributing positively to a scene that we've taken a lot from. So we'll dive into, kind of what we hope to achieve with this podcast, and we've talked a little bit about, why and how we ended up finally launching it. But as far as our goals of this podcast, obviously this is going to be, a podcast focused on competitive Pokemon. No, we will not be talking at length about the national decks and what may or may not be in it. This is, mainly competitively focused here. And of course, it's going to be a VGC emphasis, as we are VGC players at heart. Of course, Jake, has a separate life on Smogon, but, that's both where we've kind of, come into our names in the community.
Yeah, definitely more of a VGC emphasis, but if we're starved for content, I'm certainly not afraid of shoving DOU down your throats, too.
Jake reserves the right to speak about DOU on this podcast. Exactly. And if you... Hopefully we'll pick it up from our tone so far, but we really do want this to be something that's laid back and fun to listen to, because, at the end of the day, we are playing a children's video game. And I think, in certain situations and scenarios, it's fine to address it as such. And hopefully you guys have fun, as much fun listening to this as we hope to have making it. So in that sense, we do have, some ideas of things that are going to be kind of silly, some on topic, some off topic, but there will be some serious discussion mixed in.
Right. Obviously, as a competitive Pokemon podcast, we want to actually be talking about competitive Pokemon, even if it is in a more laid-back manner. We're going to cover, major events. For example, this episode is largely going to be an NAIC recap, as that happened just a couple weeks ago, and it's probably the largest tournament in America, at least throughout the year. I'm sure once we get into the more meat of the season, we're in a bit of a break before Worlds, but when we have regionals going on, we'll be talking about regional previews, regional recaps. We'll hit on some of the smaller events like mid-season showdowns and premier challenges as well.
Right, and that's, I think, one of the things that I'm personally really excited about bringing to this podcast is that not only are we going to be having recaps of these big events, like for this week, we will be talking about NAIC, but if you're anything like me, I love to look at Top Cut of LATAM PCs and stuff like that, just to see what people are coming up with, when sort of removed from the larger events, what rises to the top at some of these smaller events, and I think it's really cool. And in addition, we are going to be bringing a little bit of a feature on the VGC Online Showdown ladder as well, which I think some of those teams end up being very influential when we get into, some of the bigger events offline. So we'll definitely take a peek at those.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep online, at the forefront too, because we have events, every few weekends or so, at least majors, but pretty much everyone's always playing online, and if you don't know who Bwahakoff is, you really didn't play back in 2017, because there are so many people that just the mention of that name would strike fear into their hearts, and so obviously that never really showed up at live events, but it was such an integral part of the community for such a long time that it would be doing a disservice to just completely ignore that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it got to the point where people in live events were respecting Rock Slide Lycanroc, so that's kind of wild, and I guess that's, kind of Jake's point in the sense that it does become a very important influence on live events. Another piece of content that we do want to bring to you guys is guests just about every week, and Jake and I were very much on the same page about what kind of way we wanted to integrate these guests into our podcast, because at the end of the day, this is our podcast, but also at the end of the day, maybe the end of the next day, there are a lot of people that have some really cool things to say in the community, and we really wanted to focus the guest portion of the content on kind of like, what these players are known for, what have they done recently, what kind of teams have they run, did they recently win an event, so that's kind of something that we both feel very strongly about, and we hope to bring you some really cool content in that regard.
Yeah, and honestly, if you get tired of listening to our voices, just stick around to the end.
I'm already tired of listening to Jake's voice.
I'm tired of listening to my voice too. This has been tough. It's only been 6 minutes. But for the most part, like Brendan said, most every week. We can't guarantee every week we'll have a guest, but today we will have one, as you will see later.
Yeah, and I'm really excited that this is going to be the guest for our first episode here, but we'll get into that in a little bit. And finally, what we do want to touch on real quick is that hopefully, if you've come to this podcast, you have seen our logo already, and it is just absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
So there's an artist on Smogon that has done some art for the ZZU tier, and I reached out to him and asked him if he'd be willing to do some art for this podcast, and I mentioned that we wanted to have Snover and Mr. Mime, like, pretty much doing a podcast themselves, wearing headphones with a mic, and he said, "Oh, Mime Jr. is my favorite Pokemon, I accept." And no less than 3 days later, I think, he had this beautiful logo completely finished. So big, huge, giant thank you to AmirAlexander on Smogon. We love you so much.
I teared up a little bit.
I just full on bawled.
It was so good. It was so good. So yeah, big thank you to him, and I'm really excited that is going to be kind of our well, it is our logo, and like I said to Jake, it's also our content creator badge. So
exactly.
That's something that's very important for us in the community. It means a lot. So big thank you to him. All right, enough about us and about the podcast. We're going to jump kind of right into the meat of our content here, where we will be touching on NAIC in just a minute. But before that, we're going to start off with a piece of the show that I have affectionately referred to as Ladder Greatest Hits. And this is something that hopefully we'll be able to bring just about every episode. and it does feature the top 25 teams on the ladder. So we'll touch on that a little bit with a little bit of information that we've managed to glean from replays on Showdown. But please keep in mind that people are, on occasion, very diligent about hiding their battles.
Right.
So we've managed to pull out basically as much as we can here.
Yeah, I think about 10 or so of the top 25 had no replays available, and so we do have about 15 teams to talk about from the top 25 of the ladder as of yesterday, I believe. And so, pretty interesting stuff. The team number one, pretty much a box standard team. It was Groudon, Xerneas, Tapu Lele, Salamence, Amogus, and Incineroar. Kind of
and
a
we actually
zone
do, right? And we actually do know whose alt that was after he tweeted about it. That was Paul Chua, who ended up topping with a team that he's pretty well known for now after he won, I believe, Madison Regional with it, where it did feature, the fast, timid Roar, Groudon, and of course Tapu Lele. After seeing Tapu Fini on that archetype so much, Lele was kind of Paul's, maybe not his personal spin on it, but he ended up kind of taking it as his own, and that's kind of where that particular archetype ended up.
Yeah, Lele's kind of cool in that archetype because Fini gives you a more defensive option, but Fini paired with Groudon usually likes to abuse stuff like Swagger or Heal Pulse or something like that. And with Paul's Groudon, it was the Max Timid Eruption Earth Power one, and so obviously doesn't really care about Swagger. Heal Pulse would be good with something like Eruption, but it's not as useful as it would be with a more bulky Groudon. And so knowing that Tapu Fini may not be very important on that kind of team, he just goes for Tapu Lele instead, which supports Xerneas. I'm not going to say it supports Xerneas more than Fini, because Fini is more of a support Pokemon in nature, but it supports Xerneas differently in a pretty important way.
Agreed. And it also kind of contributes to, what's kind of been attributed to Paul as a play style kind of thing, where you just kind of like have a lot of really fast Pokemon and you like kind of like click attacks and win all the speed ties and stuff like that. So I feel like Scarf Lele really lends itself to what Paul has become known for.
Yeah. The second team is kind of reminiscent of a 2016 team in the fact that it has a Jumpluff. We got Groudon, Lunala, Koko, Mawile, Jumpluff, Aerodactyl. Really, I think the only two Pokemon it shares are the Groudon and Jumpluff, but it's a kind of a throwback to Arash's team that he won, I believe, Germany Nationals with in 2016.
Yeah, so there's clearly a pretty heavy Tailwind focus, which is definitely something that we've seen in the format up to this point with the success of Tornadus. And speaking of the success of Tornadus, that does kind of come in at third. For anybody that plays the ladder, that is Nantaro at third on the ladder with Groudon, Xerneas, Tapu Koko, Kangaskhan, Tornadus, and Amogus. And Jake and I both feel strongly about the Kang-Torn archetype, so we won't get too much into it at this time.
More on that later. Coming up in fourth, we have Kyogre, Solgaleo, Tapu Fini, Salamence, Togedemaru, and Incineroar. Kind of an interesting team. I really like the whole Kyogre plus like sturdy steel type archetype in general, because Kyogre doesn't really have a whole lot to offer against Xerneas, but if you have something like Solgaleo, that's pretty much always going to be threatening Xerneas. It's a pretty good complement to Kyogre.
Yeah, definitely, and that's kind of a comp that is sort of reminiscent of some of the stuff that we saw people running like near the end of Sun Series and maybe in part of Moon Series, with Solgaleo not really showing up too much in the Ultra Series, so kind of interesting to see it come back. And even back in Sun and Moon Series, Solgaleo was also kind of one of those things where you're like, I don't really want Stack Attack on this team, so let me try this and see what I can do with the other four. What can I add to the Stack Attack slot if I shift the Steel into the second restricted slot?
Yeah, I think the biggest Solgaleo team we saw in Moon Series, at least, was the Zygarde Solgaleo team that did pretty well in regionals.
Right, and at number 5 on the ladder here, as we move on, Jake, we start to see one of our first kind of cookie cutter-esque Kyogre Rayquaza teams, with Kyogre Rayquaza, Tapu Fini, Stack Attack, Togedemaru, and Incineroar, and that does kind of fit a lot of kind of what the recipe for Rayogre has been established as. Yeah,
definitely. It has a lot of the elements that we see on Rayogre in general. Stack Attack is pretty big as a Trick Room option, and more importantly, a Xerneas option. Incineroar pretty common. Kyogre has much higher special defense, so Incineroar is such a great partner for Kyogre. It also threatens something like Ferrothorn that might kind of wall Kyogre immediately otherwise.
Right, and we're going to jump down to 9 here after 3 slots where we were unable to pull replays. And this is something that was kind of interesting to me when I was pulling these teams is that Xerneas Lunala remains a really strong ladder team, even though it really didn't have too much of a showing at NAIC outside of our buddy Kevin Swastik, who was able to sneak into top 16 with it. But that was a little bit of a different take, one that belonged more to him as opposed to this one here at number 9, which was just the kind of the standard Xerneas Lunala, Tapu Lele, Lucario, Smeargle, and Incineroar.
Yeah, I think minus the Incineroar, that was the same 6 that won Senior Nationals. I don't remember that 6. It might have been Crobat. No, it wasn't Crobat. I don't know. It's very similar to the team that won.
Maybe it was Incineroar.
It could have been. That's true.
Right.
It was similar to the team that won Senior Nationals, which is kind of the standard Xerneas Lunala team that we've been seeing all year.
Right, and it continues to amaze me how Lucario is truly the linchpin on a team
ridiculous.
Like that. But moving on, down to 12, as we are on kind of a run of a dearth of replays here. But at number 12 is Suicide Seagull with Kyogre, Lunala, Tapu Koko, Salamence, Stakataka, and Salazzle.
I don't know Wingull learned Explosion.
It could be Destiny Bond. You don't know.
Oh, true. This is a kind of a different team, though. Kyogre, Lunala, not really something that popped up too often. Obviously, it did get second at NAIC, but really before that, there weren't a lot of big results with it. And I know that's something that Brendan and I were really hoping we would face at NAIC, but we never did.
It sure was.
Feel like everyone else got to play it except us.
Yeah, I was kind of frustrated about that. But anyway, it's kind of a weird archetype in the sense that you just have to find an Yveltal matchup from somewhere. And Tapu Koko helps, but is it truly an Yveltal matchup on its own? Not so much.
Yeah.
Not so much. And we're going to jump down to 15 here, where we see the first of two kind of interesting Necrozma Duskmane teams at number 15 here. Necrozma Duskmane, Xerneas, Tapu Lele, Kangaskhan, Tapu Fini, and Incineroar.
This is pretty similar to the team that won Bristol, I believe. I know it was Duskmane Xerneas. But interesting composition. I feel like something like this is pretty heavy on the hyper offensive end, especially because we have the Necrozma Lele combination. Pretty safe to assume that this is also Ultra Necrozma, and so something like a Psychic Terrain boosted Photon Geyser or Light That Burns the Sky going to be blowing up a lot of stuff. And it's similar. I think it's kind of similar to Lunala Xerneas in the fact that the restricted partner can pretty much blow up anything at once in order to pave the way for Xerneas, but Xerneas doesn't really support the other too often.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the goal. It seems to be the goal, right, where you just kind of set up pins and help Xerneas take down the things that it can't. But of course, that archetype does kind of have, I would say, not a favorable matchup against Xerneas Lunala, and if you can't really fudge that, I don't know why you would use it instead of Xerneas Lunala. Anyway, down to 17 here. This one I was kind of laughing when I saw it on the ladder because it looks kind of like they took the popular Kyogre teams at NAIC and then traded out Kyogre for Groudon. So this team is Groudon, Rayquaza, Tapu Fini, Mimikyu, Celesteela, and Incineroar. And of course, Mimikyu and Celesteela were both on the two top-placing Kyogre teams with Wolfe Glick and John Evans, respectively. So it's kind of interesting to see them both show up on a Groudon Rayquaza team.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty funny. Like you said, it's pretty much a smashing together of the two common Kyogre teams and their random techs. Like Wolf had the Celesteela, and John and the whole Kyogre pipeline team building group all had that Mimikyu, and so kind of funny to see them together on a team that very easily could be Kyogre, except the Ogre decided to summon the sun instead of the rain.
Yep, and as we all know, Tapu Fini is basically Kyogre, so it's a pretty fair exchange, I think.
Right.
The next team at 18 is Necrozma Duskmane, the second of the two Necrozma Duskmane teams here. Yveltal as the second restricted, and then Tapu Lele, Mawile, Smeargle, and Togedemaru. So that's a big departure from a lot of the things we've seen. I don't know if that restricted combination has shown up anywhere.
I don't think I've ever seen it personally. And Yveltal with Lele kind of screams that it's not Sucker Punch just because that's some pretty strong anti-synergy. Although, I guess Mawile.
Yveltal kind of makes you think about running Sucker Punch, so on both, on Mawile and Yveltal.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Kind of like the calling card of the pairing there.
I'd wonder if this team is Trick Room Necrozma, maybe possibly not Ultra, because something like Mawile would really want Trick Room on its side.
That's true, and there is only Yveltal as a Tailwind option, so even those max speed Adamant Mawiles that were showing up at NAIC, maybe not so much of an option here.
Yeah.
And down to 20, this is my favorite team on our
God.
list here, number 20, which is Xerneas Lunala. Not too bad. Ditto, Lopunny, Blacephalon, and Persian Alola. So that is just like kind of a lot to take in. There's 2 fake outs and then just a whole bunch of things that like to click attacks.
This is something that you like sit down to play. You go into team preview and you just immediately have a heart attack. Your heart just stops.
You cry.
You do, yeah. You cry. You like bleed internally. You immediately go into cardiac arrest. This is not the kind of thing you want to play against, because even though it looks like super janky and like objectively is super janky, there's so many things on this team that like could do so many different things. Like, I don't know, if I saw Blacephalon at team preview, I would have no idea what to expect.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is like Blacephalon has the effect on me of the reaction that you were just describing, not to mention Lopunny and Ditto thrown in there. And that's one of those teams where you look at it where it's just going to be like Calm Mind Lunala or something, or Scarf Lunala. You just have to know that something like that is coming. It's going to be Z Persian Alola.
Yeah.
And it's just really scary. Definitely you understand why something like that was able to get towards the top of the ladder, especially if it's in talented hands.
Right.
We're going to skip over 21, where Pippiner 2 holds the slot, and that's a ladder name that everybody knows, of course, but he does hide his replays. And at 22 is a pretty standard-looking Xerneas Lunala team that does feature Tapu Lele, Metagross, Smeargle, and Incineroar. And of course, Metagross starting to pop on a whole bunch of different archetypes at this point in the format.
Yeah, Metagross is cool. It has a pretty strong matchup against a lot of things. Obviously, Xerneas being a big one, but yeah, Steel is a pretty underrated attacking type in my opinion, because it's not resisted by a whole lot of things. Metagross is a really strong Pokemon in its own right. Paired with Tapu Lele, you would imagine it has Zen Headbutt, which will be threatening a whole lot of things with that Psychic Terrain boost. And then Smeargle and Incineroar, pretty common supports on Xerneas team.
Right, and the last 2 slots at 24 and 25 are 2 pretty standard comps. The first one being Xerneas Lunala, Tapu Lele, Lucario, Smeargle, and Incineroar, which of course we've touched on. Very strong archetype that didn't show up at Masters NAIC, but of course did win the event in Seniors. And finally is Kyogre, Rayquaza, Tapu Koko, Metagross, Togedemaru, and Incineroar. And this one is kind of another one of those things that has just kind of like a team-building quirk where it's like, man, I really want an electric type. I'll take both. I'll just go for it. Maybe we'll throw Discharge in there.
Yeah, I guess you could. Koko Togedemaru could be indicative of Discharge, but again, it's kind of a standard Ryogre comp. Tapu Koko pops up on those a lot, which I like a lot because it gives you a pretty strong matchup against both opposing Rayquaza and Kyogre, kind of in one Pokemon.
Definitely. So that does wrap up Ladder Greatest Hits for our first episode. Some interesting stuff, and I think it's fun to talk about for the reasons we mentioned earlier. It obviously has an important impact on the live event metagame. So we'll, hopefully over the life of this podcast, we'll be keeping tabs on some of those teams for you guys. And for the next portion of our podcast, really the meat of what this episode is going to be is the NAIC recap. So those teams, the top 64 and the usage and the day 2 and the top 8, those teams are all available on various media throughout the community, be it Victory Road, Trainer Tower. Maybe you have your favorite bootleg Photoshop user who can throw all those top 8 teams into a nice little graphic for you. But of course, there's plenty of places to find them. So hopefully you're somewhat familiar with some of the teams that have done well now, but Jake and I are going to touch on some of what we felt were the storylines here coming out of NAIC.
And just for reference, all of these resources will be linked in the description as well if you don't know where to find them. We're mainly looking at Trainer Tower and Victory Road, like we said. Twitter user Temporal VGC also made a really cool graphic that showed the different restricted pairs that were in top 64, so that will be linked as well, as we will probably be hitting on it.
Excellent. So, Jake, when we were putting together this podcast, we did put together a few storylines, and this was one that you kind of brought up that didn't even really occur to me until I went back through some of the teams that were there, and that being that, there are a whole bunch of teams throughout the top 64 that look pretty familiar, and we talked about that a little bit as it pertains to Ryogre and Xerneas Lunala when we were talking about ladder teams, is that those teams have a recipe, right? With Kyogre, Rayquaza, you throw in an electric type, you pick a bulky steel type, and you want an Incineroar, toss that in there, and basically you have a Ryogre team.
Yeah.
And those did show up, but also on the other side is we saw just some random nonsense that ended up doing so well. And of course, I'm going to pedal back a little bit because nonsense is a bit much if you got CP at NAIC with your team. Like, all power to you. But, definitely Pokemon that we saw that nobody could have reasonably expected to sneak its way into CP contention.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, because there's a pretty strong dichotomy between, like, top 8 and even top 16, and then the rest of top 64. Because if you look at top 8, other than Graham Amity, who got second with a team that no one could have ever built, even, like, in their sleep.
No.
But the other 7 teams in top 8, pretty standard looking. Obviously, we hadn't seen Wolfe's team before. John Paul Lopez Buiza's team looks like a pretty standard X-Ray team. John Evans has a Rayogre team that the Mimikyu is obviously something new, but the other 5 pretty reasonable. Melvin's been using that team all year, and so I think we would have been surprised to see something that wasn't that. And then 6, 7, and 8 all had the different variations of the King Torn team that's been popping up for the last couple months or so. And so top 8 minus Graham, pretty reasonable. Top 16, most of the same storyline. Then you get into some of top 32. And this is, granted, this is still day 2, so everyone in top 32 was playing on day 2. They qualified from day 1. But even, like, you look at Chef's team, Ben Grismer in 19th place. You see Lopunny Naganadel, and you think, oh, that's interesting. And then you get down to, I mean, obviously you have like Ragav, who has the same team as John Evans. You have Aaron Traylor, who has the same team as Wolfe. But then you also have Juwan Kim, who's running Lilligant Zoroark. And then
of course
Fidget, who's running Breloom Walrein. And so kind of these fun like sync pairs that we'll hit a little bit later on in this segment. But it's a really fun mishmash of things you would exactly expect from certain people and things you would not expect from anyone.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting, and I think that some of these way offbeat Pokemon, a lot more like there's always one team, right? There's always somebody that throws a whole bunch of hyper offense mons, and one of them is I don't know, Metachamp for lack of a better example at this point, and manages to sneak into day 2 just by making a couple reads or like having just an offensive combo that the meta at large isn't prepared for. But I think in top 30, like there's a lot of them, like a relative lot of them with Excadrill, Roserade, of course, Sam Marsma, Dr. Fidget with that Breloom Walrein that he just seems to get CP at every event he brings to for some reason. So I think it's really cool. Like it showed up, stuff like that showed up a little bit more at this event than I think I would have expected it to.
Yeah, definitely. But it's really cool to see, though. I think, especially in these restricted formats, if you can find like wacky different support Pokemon that support your main restricteds even better, this is the kind of format to use them in, just because I think the name of the game in a format with all these incredibly powerful Pokemon is that if you can facilitate them to do as much damage as possible, then you're probably going to have a pretty good time.
Definitely, and those teams did show up here. Absolutely. And Jake, you touched on some of the Rayogre stuff that showed up at this event. We touched on how it is cookie cutter to an extent, but what I really want to talk about is you and I have been kind of referring to it as the Rayogre pipeline, which I think is I think the community refers to it as the Rayogre Discord, and it's kind of a joke among people about whether or not you've earned your invite to the Rayogre Discord. But what it managed to pump out for this event was the Rayogre with Metagross and Mimikyu alongside Tapu Koko and Incineroar, which are pretty standard on the event. I'm sorry, on the archetype, and I thought that was pretty interesting adaptation that they had, and I don't know if you saw it at all at the event, Jake, but I played Colin Hire in round 2, who was using it, and it's kind of a really cool team because Mimikyu weirdly is a really good offensive pairing to the restricted combination, and I kind of saw it in team preview, and I was like, okay, I'm not really afraid of Mimikyu, and then I was just playing around it for 3 games. It's really wild, and it kind of shows that these guys that have been playing with the archetype for the entire format are definitely onto something here and have a good idea of what they need to do with the team comp.
I think it makes a lot of sense, especially for the mirror, because Mimikyu, it was carrying the Mimikyu MZ, so Let's Snuggle Forever had that at its disposal, and especially in the mirror, a lot of times Ray doesn't really like facing other Ray because you have potential speed ties, and a lot of it can come down to who Dragon Ascends first or last and gets the defense drop and all that stuff. And so Mimikyu, with that disguise ability, it can just sit in front of Ray as long as it has its disguise intact, throw off a Let's Snuggle Forever and just delete it. And I think we saw on stream John Evans, he just blew back his Xerneas with Let's Snuggle Forever too.
Yeah, he just one-shot it. That was I mean, like I think while we were watching the match, I'm not sure if I was with you at this point, Jake, but we pulled out the calc and we were like, "Oh my God, it's actually gonna do it!" And as soon as he got the Let's Snuggle Forever onto the slot, and it went away, and I guess that kind of shows it's an interaction you don't really think about too much with other things besides Xerneas utilizing Fairy Aura. So a really interesting Pokemon in that regard. And of course, we did touch on Metagross a little bit, which has shown up on a number of different archetypes in just top 32 alone. It showed up on X-Ray. It showed up on, of course, Kevin's team with the Xerneas Lunala. So a really cool Pokemon that did find its way onto a couple of high-placing Ryogre teams that did come out of the pipeline there. And one more thing that we did talk about, Jake, as it regards to the pipeline, is even the older version of the Ryogre pipeline team managed to make day 2.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I think Raghav is probably one of the most well-known members of the Ryogre pipeline, as we call it. Obviously, Colin Hire as well. But we had Raghav, we had John, we had, I believe, one more player using that team in day 2. But we also had
Shohei.
Yeah, exactly. But we also had Diana Brose and Caleb Breyer using the prior version of that team, the Madison version, which Colin made top 4 with and Jive Time got finals with. It's still Ryogre, Coco, Incineroar, but it's the Stack Attack Whimsicott version. And so maybe the two of them not super up with the Ryogre pipeline. Maybe they didn't have their invites to the Discord yet, but they probably earned them at this event because they both did place in top 32, making day 2 with that. I'm not going to say outdated because Madison really wasn't that long ago, and clearly the team still functions very well, but just not the most up-to-date version of it.
Right, and it does go to kind of maybe I don't know if we can anoint the archetype so much yet, but definitely at least that group of team builders are clearly onto something.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely, and definitely something to watch as we go towards Worlds. And Jake, we alluded to it earlier, the fall and fall of Kang Torn.
Originally, we were going to talk about the rise and fall of Kang Torn, but I changed it because I personally, this is my opinion, don't come for me, I really don't like it at all. I just don't.
Right, and I agree with you there, and I think that one of the, we kind of, I know you had a match that you really want to talk about, but this kind of matchup that you ended up playing is kind of the reason that it's maybe not something that's so consistent. And of course that it managed to make all those top 8s, but in the hands of just 3 phenomenal players. Right. And I think, if you had given just about any team to Kyle or Pato or Ashton, that they would have made a pretty good run at top cut, and that maybe this isn't necessarily so like a nod to the archetype as much as these 3 players. Like you said, I think these 3 players are phenomenal and probably would have done as well as I did with any team. But Kyle specifically has kind of been carrying this archetype along with Joseph pretty much the whole year. They've been the 2 champions of it, I would say. And I mean, they're great players. All 4 of these people we just mentioned, great players. Teams, like Como in 2019, I just don't get it. I think this team in general just kind of relies on people not knowing how to play against it. It's a pretty good ladder team because you can pretty much stomp through best of 1 pretty easily with it, and I respect that aspect of it. But I think as soon as you have played it a few times on ladder and you get to a best of 3 event and you sit down and see that team in team preview, I think you have a general idea of how you need to go about playing against it. Most of the time this team leads Kang Torn. They try to sacrifice one or both of them while they have speed control in their favor, and then set up with Zern or Como or fire off eruptions with Groudon. And I think if you can manage to make those trades either neutral or in your favor, that's pretty much not a loss for that team, because especially if you can match Tailwind or something, you have your own Tailwind user and you get Tailwind up as they do and they no longer have the speed advantage, then it's kind of oh well. Right, yeah, okay. Well, then the team folds as soon as there's no speed advantage. And I think one of the things about the team, and I likened it to 2017 Eevee in this regard, is that it kind of preys on knowing what your flowchart against it is going to be.
Yeah, exactly.
If that makes any sense, is that, you have your Tornadus out on the field and you're looking at a Salamence, and you're going to taunt the Salamence so that you can get your Tailwind next turn. Well, what happens if Salamence just clicks Hyper Voice?
Yeah.
Then, everything kind of goes away, and, if the other slot does something meaningful, then it's a super easy way to make trades in your favor on turns 1, 2, 3, in my opinion. It ended up folding in top 8 for a couple of different reasons, and
One had nothing to do with battle itself.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about
And
that one.
it just kind of showed like how it kind of collapsed against players that had a game plan with it. And I didn't get to see the matches of all these players over the course of the weekend, and I'm sure they made some insane plays and things of that nature. But on the bright stage, it did kind of fold there.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so Jake and I do want to talk about our team that we ran at NAIC right now because we were really excited about it and we think it was a cool call. We ended up bringing Yveltal Groudon with Nihilego, and Stakataka and Tapu Fini and Salamence.
Yep.
And we thought it was really neat, and we think it was a cool call, but we didn't end up getting a lot of the matchups that we really wanted to play against. And we talked to a bunch of people over the course of the day, and one person in particular I kept talking to was like, "Oh man, last round I played Ultra Necrozma. It was so hard. Oh man, I just played Lunala Kyogre. Man, that was kind of tough for me." And I was like, "Why can't I have this? I was playing Xerneas Groudon all day."
Right.
And it's kind of a good. It does exemplify the matchup roulette nature of this format, but also it was a really fun team.
A little bit, yeah. I don't want to blame at least my run on matchup roulette because my losses were certainly, legit, and I knew that
real losses.
Yeah. Nothing was crazy stupid or anything. Like I'm not distraught about how NAIC went, other than I wish I would have done a little bit better. But honestly, I love this team. It was so much fun. I think both of us knew for a while that we wanted to use Yveltal at this tournament. I personally wanted to use it really since Hartford when Tommy won with Psy Spam. I figured, okay, Yveltal is going to be really good, and then people kept using that kind of team. Lunala started popping up again, and that's when I thought, okay, yeah, I'm definitely using Yveltal because it just has such a strong matchup against a lot of things that I didn't play at NAIC. Not mad.
Right, I was going to say that too. Is I feel like I left it behind more than I brought it, which was just infuriating. But
it was still great though. Like we were considering Kyogre instead of Groudon, and we had Tapu Koko in the Fini slot on that team. But I think we were so terribly afraid of playing Ferrothorn because there was pretty much an instant loss that we both
there was no
chickened
matchup
out and went back to Groudon.
Right. And I've told this story to a couple of people, but I was finished with the Kyogre version when I played a game on ladder. I got 2 turns to double target a Ferrothorn, and on the second turn, my opponent says, "Nice try." And I was like, okay, that's fine. We don't have to play this variant anymore.
Right.
And Groudon was good. I think it was a fun call.
Yeah.
And another thing we touched on briefly during the ladder portion of our discussion here, Jake, is that XL kind of disappeared almost entirely from Masters NAIC cut, with the exception of Kevin Swastik, which is, I mean, he ended up building a team, and I think he told us he laddered a lot with it, and really it was maybe a little bit better prepared for the metagame that it ended up finding itself in Masters, whereas maybe the Lucario version wasn't. So kind of interesting to see it fall, but another congratulations to Kevin there. And a burning question that I'm sure a lot of players have here, Jake. Is Medicham a real Pokemon? Please discuss.
I mean, objectively, yes, it is a Pokemon. It has a Dex entry number. You can catch it. I think you can catch Meditite. I forget where. Definitely in Ruby and Sapphire. I forget what route. So yes, it is a Pokemon. But is it a good one?
That remains to be seen. I think maybe pure power is just really underestimated as an ability, because I'm pretty sure on stream Graham did in excess of 50% to a Rayquaza switch in with a high jump kick, and I was like, excuse me?
Yeah, that was kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, and it seemed like he had some sort of an idea with what he was doing there with the poison jab and the bullet punch. Try to get the most out of the turns when maybe it's done its job if it attacks twice. If it fakes out and gets an attack off, then that's it's probably done its job. And it seemed to gel well with the rest of what played like a hyper offensive team. But it's definitely interesting to see something that was literally, it wasn't even a thought in anybody's mind. It's not like one of these Pokemon where you're like, oh, okay, Excadrill's been showing up a little bit. It does this thing. I've seen it once or twice on ladder. Nobody was ready for Medicham.
No. And I think it made a lot of sense on Graham's team as well, because Medicham is incredibly strong, just like Graham. But I think one thing that is usually used as a strike against it, but in this case may have actually worked in Graham's favor, is that it's also really frail. So you have something that can come on. It's a generally fast fake out. It ties Kangaskhan if it's Jolly. But it's a faster fake out. It has the option to do a lot of damage with a high jump kick, but it also gets knocked out by pretty much anything. And if you're leading Metacham next to your Tailwind Lunala and you want a free switch on turn 1 as Metacham gets knocked out, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you get your Lunala plus whatever else next to it in Tailwind with 3 turns to work with, that can just end games immediately sometimes.
So what you're saying is Metacham Lunala is a better version of Kang Torn?
I never thought about that. Joseph might fight me if I agree with you, so I'm going to say no?
Maybe. And speaking of cool Pokemon to make their way into CP at NAIC, I have, for those of you who are already fans of Pokemon Masters, the gacha game that's going to be coming out later this summer, they do have sync pairs. Was kind of one of the few things that they teased here. So I have kind of like assigned a couple of sync pairs that showed up at this tournament. And of course, Metacham, probably now Graham's spirit Pokemon, in addition to some of the other ones that are a little bit well known in advance of the tournament. One of the best known ones being Gary Chan and Mewtwo. And I think he's cut nationals in 2016 with Mewtwo, and has just kind of like played it all over the place. Yeah, and he's played it all over the place in the restricted format. So always cool to see him get towards the top with that one. And the next one being Sun Dude, Juwon Kim, and his Lilligant, and it's always fun to see what he comes up with.
His teams are wild. I've never played him, and I never want to, because like I mentioned earlier, that's one of the teams you look at team preview and just immediately collapse in your chair, because what are you supposed to do against Lilligant Zoroark?
Right. When the Lilligant that's on the field might not even be a Lilligant.
Right.
how do you play around
on the
that?
field sucker punches you, and you're like, oh, that was a Lilligant. That's not good.
Right, and Juwon's a super nice dude, so it's always nice to see him doing well at these tournaments. And of course with Lilligant. Another pair that we've seen often at the top tables for some reason is Dr. Fidget, Sam Arzma, and his Walrein Breloom combo. And
this
I
one
forget who I was talking
formats
to.
too. Like he uses this every year, and no one cracks it. And he cuts with it like every year. I think he's definitely cut multiple regionals with Breloom Walrein. Yeah,
right.
I don't know.
And then he always goes on Twitter and he's like, "Why do people keep letting me get away with this?" And one of the things that I think is funny is that it used to be Walrein, Breloom, and Chandelure, and the years have not been kind to Chandelure, I guess, because it kind of lost its place.
Have they been kind to Walrein?
I don't know. Apparently kinder to Walrein than Chandelure. And one Pokemon that I'm sure not too many people want to talk about is, of course, Shedinja. And 2 players over the course of this format have really defined the use of the Pokemon. The first one being Melvin K, who has, I think, just cut every international. I'm not sure.
He's cut 5 or 6 now. It's crazy. He's so consistent.
It's unbelievable. He just shows up all over the place. And, of course, Chef, Ben Grismer, who's been using that Shedinja, Yveltal, Groudon, Lopunny combo. And the legend is that he also kind of lent his Shedinja knowledge to Wolfe, who took it to top 4 at Berlin.
Madison. Close enough.
Yes. Same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, always cool to see players using, what you would describe as their signature Pokemon, and taking it to a good placement there. So a couple other things that we want to talk about now that we've discussed sync pairs a little bit is X-Ray.
Yeah, X-Ray.
The best placing X-Ray was, I believe, Javier Valdez, correct?
No, there was one in top 8, John Paul.
Right, John Paul, which was a little bit more standard, but the format that won the most recent, or the archetype that won the most recent international really had quite a fall from grace here.
Yeah, there aren't too many in top 32 in day 2. I can count 2 or 3, I believe. Yeah, just 2. So John Paul, who managed to get into top 4, and then Javier Valdez, like you said, who jumped into top 16. And Javier's team was crazy. It was Scarf Xerneas, and
I played against him, and he just gave me the absolute hands. Absolute hands.
Rayquaza, Xerneas, Metagross, Tapu Fini. Okay, pretty normal. Gastrodon, Mandibuzz. That's different.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and then when you know the sets, it really just kind of like adds to the mystique.
It was Scarf Xerneas, and I think Caleb said it had Endeavor. I know Caleb played him and got blown back by Xerneas.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that it got that. I know it had Psyshock, because I was, in testing, X-Ray was like my favorite thing to face, because Nihilego just kind of like 1v4s it, and then I got Scarf Shy Psyshocked and then Bullet Punched and then like Rayquaza surfed me. So I was like, oh, okay.
That's not good.
No. So kind of an interesting archetype that kind of mysteriously disappeared except for a team that, that's one of those teams where if you gave it to anybody besides Javier, they wouldn't be able to play it. It's just like one of those things that you just kind of like know like the back of your hand.
Right. I think it's interesting that the person who won the most recent international was also in top 8 of this one, Pato, and he was nowhere. He wasn't using X-Ray himself anymore. So I'm not sure if the people that had been playing X-Ray decided, maybe it's not a good call anymore. Maybe they got bored of it. Maybe they just wanted to use something different. We saw Pato using that King Torn team, but. Interesting that it just kind of died. Like we really hadn't seen much of X-Ray since Berlin at all. Even in Madison, I don't think it popped up too much.
Yeah, so kind of an interesting disappearance, and in that regard, so was Lunadon, which is the archetype that's been anointed by Gavin Michaels for this format, and I know he's been kind of labbing it in the same way that some of the Ray Ogre guys have been using it for a couple months now, I would think, and that didn't really show up at all. And I know we talked about this as it pertained to our team, Jake, is like, can you give that archetype an Yveltal matchup?
It's really hard because obviously Yveltal is a pretty like insanely hard stop to Lunala itself. Groudon in some circumstances can put a big chunk in Yveltal, but it also takes a big chunk back, and Yveltal's not really something that's super easy to like patch up with one Pokemon, just because a lot of the answers to Yveltal involve like positioning around it and not letting it take over games, and there's not really one Pokemon. Maybe like Z-Move Koko is like one of a few things that can knock it out. Obviously Xerneas is a pretty big issue for it, but on Lunadon you can't run Xerneas, and so it's really difficult for Lunadon teams to patch up that matchup. And like on the team that Gavin and friends were using, the 4 supports were Salamence, Stakataka, Feeny, and Incineroar. Salamence can double edge it and then probably get knocked out by foul play in return. Stakataka does a lot with Gyro Ball, so it's kind of a fair stop. Feeny, one of the best answers to Yveltal, but again, not like an immediate offensive answer, and so...
Right, it's just kind of a bunch of Pokemon that have like neutral at best matchups against Yveltal.
That's a very good way
like
to describe
when you have like something, it's just like it has so much bulk, especially given that it tends to run Assault Vest at this point in the format. Now that the Z-move portion of the format is over, it's just like really difficult to get off the field. Like, even if it's Moonblast Feeny, like nice, you did 35%.
Right.
Now you're gonna get snarled and O-winged, and like how are you gonna get it off the field? So I think that like those kind of matchups is, in theory, that's like a really cool restricted pairing, right? Where you just like have a good Pokemon as far as like guaranteed speed control and also threatening offense next to Groudon. But I think maybe it struggles to get through things like Yveltal or even like opposing Tapu Fini.
Yeah, and I think one of the big tells for like an archetype kind of losing its steam as a format progresses is the people that are the champions of it kind of setting it aside. I think one thing that really stuck out to me back in Moon Series was when Alexander Hill won Collinsville with Lunadon. No, sorry, not one. Got second with Lunadon at Collinsville to Jake Major. But afterwards, I believe it was Scott Glaza that tweeted, if you showed me this team and asked me who was running it, I would have said Alexander Hill 10 times out of 10. And it's kind of it's kind of that archetype that he's come to be known for. Like he won Fort Wayne 2017 with a really hard Trick Room team, and it's just the kind of team that you would expect from him. And if he, he definitely ditched it for, I think his Groudons are in this tournament, but.
I played against him round 1.
Oh, right. So, it's when these people that are known for using these archetypes, like we said for Pato, too, like Pato put aside X-Ray to use King Torn at this tournament, and so kind of an interesting tell for both of those archetypes that maybe they're on their way out.
Right. Yep, so those are kind of our thoughts here on the the results of NAIC, and of course, we are not the authority on any of these things. So if you guys have opinions on this and you want to interact with us on Twitter, we would love to have you. Thanks for coming by the first portion of our podcast here where we're able to discuss a whole bunch of different stuff. The latter, of course, is going to be something that we'll feature pretty regularly. And, of course, not every day we get to feature an NAIC recap, so that was pretty exciting. Some cool stuff happened there. And now we are going to wrap up the first portion of our podcast here before we dive into the guest portion. And we are very excited this week to bring you some content featuring Aaron Traylor, Unreality, on Twitter. He's one of the best people in the community, and that's not even an opinion, that's a fact. You can ask anybody. Just a phenomenal presence in the community. And of course, he did pilot the team that Wolfe ended up winning the international championship with at this event. So like we said, with the personalized content, we feel like he's got a lot of cool stuff to talk about here, and stuff that nobody else can really talk about. So we're really excited to bring that to you pretty soon. All right, and we are now here with our special guest of the week here. And as we mentioned, it is Aaron Traylor, known to the wider Pokemon community as Unreality. Aaron, welcome to the first episode of the Soundproof podcast.
Thank you. I just flew in, and boy, are my arms tired.
This concludes our interview with Aaron Traylor.
So, Aaron, we've got a couple things that we want to talk to you about, and of course our goal with the guests that we have is to kind of personalize the content that we ask them to bring to our podcast here. But before we do the actual thing that we just said we were going to do, just kind of want to get kind of a general thought, and you can make this as brief or as lengthy as you want, on the North America International Championship and on the state of the Ultra metagame. And I know that's very vague, but just kind of hit me with your thoughts.
So here's what I'm getting is, hey Aaron, welcome to our podcast. We're so excited to have you. Also, here's everything at once. What do you think of it? Let me just drop a bomb on you.
Just give me the greatest hits.
Sure. So, obviously, I was very pleased with the way that the North American International Championships went because my team building partner won, and that was cool.
He did, yes.
And I did pretty okay, which was cool, but not as cool. And I would have liked it if I was up there too. But I thought it was a good weekend, and so. I guess I can talk about my personal tournament experiences now or later.
Sure. How about we'll go into that now. So the first thing, we've got a couple of questions that we want to talk to you about as it pertains to the team choice.
Yeah.
So first of all, I know that you are kind of, I don't want to say infamous, but well-known Zerndon player. Why did you go with Ryogre?
So, yeah, totally. I can totally give you that line of thought. So I was doing my homework before the tournament and not my actual homework, I was just researching. I was looking at tournament results and I was watching battles and I was like, man, there are so many different kinds of Zerndon. And I kind of, from my experience, because I went to every regional in Ultra except for Daytona, and I played Zerndon at all of them, and I played Zerndon at Berlin, and it's the same team every time. But just sort of looking around, it was a very different experience from in 2016, where I also played Zerndon a bunch. And in 2016, Zerndon was good because of its power. Xerneas was great, Groudon was great. No other Pokemon had the tools to stop the both of them together with the support Pokemon Smeargle. One team did, and that was Wolfe's Worlds winning team. And then, right after he won Worlds, everyone figured out, oh, okay, so that's how I have to beat that. And then Zerndon went back to winning all the regionals. So, but the game has changed. And now we have Z-moves and other Pokemon, and Mega Rayquaza is better than ever. So what Zerndon is carried by in 2019 is its diversity. And there are, well, at least going to Nationals, I thought there were 3 or 4 different viable archetypes that you could run with Xerneas and Groudon. So there wasn't a Zerndon that I thought was more powerful than the other ones, with a small caveat. And so I thought that, some were better against some teams and worse against others, and I thought that people would be ready for it. And I knew that I didn't want to be going to a tournament where some people were totally ready to deck me, and that was just how it was going to go down. So I thought that if Zerndon did well, it would be a function of its volume, not its power. And that's never a good sign when you want to be the player at the top of the championships. The small caveat there is that I do think Xerneas Groudon with Kangaskhan and Tornadus is much better than any other Xerneas Groudon team. But it was a couple weeks before the tournament, and I didn't think I would have the experience on it to be comfortable.
So you just went ahead and undermined everything that we've been talking about for the last 30 to 40 minutes.
Oh, did I?
Because Jake and I feel pretty strongly that is the worst version of Xerneas Groudon.
Okay, sure. Let's fight about it then. That's exciting.
So it's interesting that you would say, okay, sure, we'll fight. Let's throw down. Jake,
I just think that team preys on you its opponents not knowing how to play it. I think as soon as that team loses a speed advantage, it crumbles. And I think that's my main issue with it. I think it's a great ladder team. I think it's really powerful at stomping through best of one stuff. But as soon as you play someone that knows how it works, or you play a game in best of 3, and then they figure out, oh, they Tailwind and they Icy Wind, and then they bring in Zern and then they win. I think at that point is when that team becomes really hard to use.
Brendan, do you have anything to add?
That's pretty much the gist of it. It's just I think earlier in the podcast I likened it to Smeargle, or not Smeargle, Eevee teams, in the sense that it preys on you knowing its flow chart, right? So you always expect to see a fake out Tailwind. So if you play around your opponent's logical response to that, I feel like it's very easy to make positive trades on turn 1 or turn 2.
Mm-hmm. So I think all that is fair, but Kangaskhan and Tornadus is interesting to me because it guarantees that speed control.
Right.
In a way that other teams really can't afford to. Tornadus with its ability Prankster and Kangaskhan with its Fake Out and Roar pretty much mean that you can't ever get Trick Room up in front of that. And that's a very big deal if you have Xerneas and Frail Groudon in the back. And so the way I sort of see Kang Torn, which makes it so powerful to me, is that Kangaskhan and Tornadus, you kind of have to not ignore what they're doing. And you have to kind of try to take a KO before they get the Z move off, before they start chipping your Pokemon. If you take one of those KOs and Tailwind comes up, then you are in a very bad place very quickly.
Right.
And that's what makes Kangaskhan and Tornadus so powerful to me. But your points are also extremely valid. If the Kangaskhan Tornadus player misplays their speed control, or doesn't KO their own Tornadus and Kangaskhan fast enough, and allows you to match or set your own speed control, then you can totally walk all over it. And I think that's part of the challenge for these players.
So Aaron, then what was it about that team specifically that made you pivot away from it, if you feel strongly about it?
I just knew, because as you mentioned, there are some flowcharts, and it was maybe 2 weeks, a week and a half before the tournament, and I was making this call, and also I work a 9 to 5. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to put in the time I needed to be able to stack up to players like Kyle Livinghouse and Joe Caracosta, who basically built the team and have experience on it.
Yeah.
In 26, so this is another good tie-in to my own tournament run, but my deal is being experienced on teams. I have never, bar one time, gone into pretty much any tournament, even a PC, without ladder games and experience and lots of best of 3s. That whole 5 a.m. crew, that is the polar opposite of what I do.
Right.
And so I wanted to be comfortable in King Torn, and I knew it was flowchart heavy, and I knew I wasn't going to be the best one in the field, and I knew that that's not a team that you win the championships with.
Totally fair. When you lay it all out, it just makes too much sense.
Yeah. So Kangaskhan and Tornadus is exciting for me going forward too. And I guess we can move this later, but because the last 2 slots are very flexible.
Yes.
And we've seen a bunch of different stuff.
In the sense that one was fast Mawile at this tournament.
Well, I don't think Mawile or Como are very good Pokemon.
We share that opinion.
But somehow there was 2 Como-Os in top 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about my own tournament run.
Sure, let's.
Let me move this podcast from one section to the
Please,
other
Aaron.
for you.
By all means, yeah. We
It's
would
your
love
show,
to.
after
Yeah,
all.
your
Yes.
tournament run is pretty high on our list of
Yes.
things to talk about. So by all
Okay,
means.
cool. And again, I think me and Wolf hopefully are going to write a report about this, but I think my tournament run is an interesting foil to his tournament run, because so as I mentioned, with one exception, I've prepared really extensively, had like a ton of experience on the ladder with teams, and this tournament is that one exception for me.
Oh wow.
We threw the team together like maybe a week before, and I had less than like 35 ladder games with it. I played like 2 or 3 best of 3s in the driver's seat. And that is all totally foreign for me. And so it was a fun tournament, and part of that is because when you play with a team for a while, you get in habits, and sometimes you autopilot. And when you when you throw it together and sit down in that chair, you don't do that. You certainly do not do that. So it was fun to kind of lay the track down as I went, and that had some positives, such as me being able to play really flexibly, and identify win cons and feel really good about my wins. And it had its downsides, such as when I played Graham in round 2, and got wiped on stream, such as when I sort of fumbled my odds, and made a miscalculation to lose to Jake Powell, and then when Caleb blew me out of the water in round 9. Yeah. So, Wolf and I had very different tournament experiences. Again, we'll talk about this in our team report, but I'm here now, and that's not getting written right now. So, Wolf played 5 Zerndons on the first day.
Ooh.
And that's great, because that's what we expected. You know, as I said going into Nationals, I was like, Zerndon is going to be a volume call. I want to prepare for Zerndon, the Chemo and Raghav Ray Ogre team, Psychic Spam, and especially Kang Torn Zerndon. And so Wolf played all those Zerndons, that was great. And he brought every Pokemon of his team, and he was crushing it. He actually beat 2 Ferrothorn, which is, like, mind-blowing, because our team had no fire move.
Yeah.
And so, my schedule, I played, like, 4 Psy-Spam, 3 Lunala comps. So, like, Lunadon, Luna Ogre.
This makes
And
me
then-
so sad, Aaron.
I know.
Jake's Andy Veldon. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I had, and then actually it was only 3 Psy Spam, because I also played
only
one.
3,
I played
only
one
3.
Zerndon. I played Kyle Livinghouse, and that was a good set.
Yeah.
And then I played XY Roserade.
Yes.
And then Grey Ogre. And I finished the day with 73% resistance or something.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So it was hard. Luna Ogre was really hard for the team. Because so if they get Tailwind up and they get Kyogre in, you basically have to hope they don't have a single target water move, and you have to stall it out. Because I was so onto Kang Torn for this tournament, I was like, Wolf, you know, we really have to be mindful of speed control. We really have to be mindful of people setting up Tailwind, especially. I don't think Trick Room will go anywhere this tournament. And outspeeding us, and he was like, nah. And then, like, I kind of suffered because he totally knew how to play around in Tailwind, and I was a little bit less successful at doing that. It really only bit me versus Graham. The other story out of this weekend is, like, I was sort of the crash test dummy for his run. I played Graham in round 2, and you can see, like, I don't know if you guys saw that set, but it was just so bad. I was, like, trying to pivot around Mawile, and Mega Metagym, and it didn't work.
Right.
And then he got his Tailwind up, and he got his Pokemon in, and I lost. Yeah. And I lost to Jake Powell a couple of rounds before he did, but that was a pretty good matchup. And so then the other thing that was different about our schedules is on the second day, he continued to play a mix of Xerneas teams, and I played 3 Rayogre teams.
Yeah.
And I lost to 2 of them. And part of it, I just wasn't experienced in that matchup, and these guys were a little more experienced. Part of it was our team isn't optimized to really win those Rayogre mirrors. It's just like Celestial is hard to deal with. Good luck. And then part of it is I got pretty unlucky. My weekend was sort of marred by Origin Pulse misses. And
yeah.
I really like to take responsibility for every one of my losses, right? Like, I'm never satisfied by saying, like, I lost this game due to luck. And then here's the but, me and Jake Powell set on the first day, I double missed the Origin Pulse, and then the last round versus Benji Wang for top 16 and $250, game 1, he double missed his Origin Pulse. And game 2, I double missed Origin Pulse, and then like on a pivotal turn to like win the game. Like, I'm not just saying like, oh, turn 1 I double missed the Origin Pulse. It's like, oh, cool, like last turn, pew pew, miss. Okay, I guess I win/lose. And then the third game, I like missed 3 consecutive Origin Pulses to lose the game. And so
you're allowed to blame luck there, Aaron.
A little bit, yeah.
I think the takeaway is, I told this to Wolfe, and he was like, "Oh, I definitely had games where if I was in that position, I would have lost." And so I think sort of the takeaway is that we did a good job this weekend, and that he played really well and got some of the matchups he needed to. I didn't play as well, and I didn't get some of the matches that I needed to, and I got a little less lucky. But that happens. And really, just the point of team building is to put yourself in a position where you can win. And Wolfe winning this tournament, like, reminded me, well, not reminded me, but, like, that my takeaway from this weekend is, like, if he could have done it, then, like, seed the RNG a little differently, I could have done it. And although I didn't win and I'm not satisfied by my losses, it's an okay takeaway.
I think it's a super good takeaway.
Right.
I feel like that kind of thing definitely factors into restricted formats more than a lot of other ones. So
right.
Maybe a little bit less so now that Smeargle and Dark Void are not in the meta anymore.
Yeah.
So, Aaron, the one thing that kind of separates your team from the rest of the Rayogre teams right now is Celesteela. So can you talk to us about the choice, and then specifically, why did you end up using an attack boosting spread?
Sure. So first off, it wasn't that unique. 2 other players in the tournament that weren't affiliated with me and Wolfe actually had Celesteela.
Interesting.
Brian Hume and Modern Gamer, I think, Joseph Selmer.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
They had the same 6, just probably different sets and stuff.
Oh.
Yeah,
That's
pretty
cool.
wild. And I always like that, because, when lightning strikes twice, you're onto something.
Yeah, for
They
sure.
do you think they poached it from the ladder?
Nah, no way. I'm sure. Yeah, so Celesteela is really good. I think okay. My opinion going into the tournament was that Celesteela was sort of like surprise factor in a way. Like, not like super surprise factor. But this is how, Nails won a lot of tournaments in 2017 by doing this sort of thing. You build a smart anti-meta call, and then you take a tiny twist on it, and you throw it just far enough out of the metagame that you can't you haven't thought about it in practice.
Yes.
And that's sort of like how Nails, part of how Nails won in Roanoke in 2017. He had a good matchup against the meta team there, and he twisted the knife, and he won the tournament very easily.
Yeah.
And so it sort of seemed like that to me. And people are ready for Celesteela now. But here's the thing. Oh, I will say more about attack boosting Celesteela in a sec. But Celesteela in Kyogre is always a stable endgame against Groudon. Just always. Good luck. And Celesteela next to Rayquaza is it's only weak to fire, which you have Kyogre for. And heavy boosting, so heavy slam with an attack boosting Celesteela always KO, always 2 shots Frail Xerneas at -1, and always 1 shots Frail Lele at -1.
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
And like,
okay.
what do you can get the lefties survive with you can get the +2 Moonblast survive with leftovers,
Yeah.
and like at that point, what else do you really need to count for?
No, that's pretty much it. It makes a ton of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, if Celesteela is attacking, you kind of avoid those end games where it's like, well, they have 3 Pokemon and I have 1. Better Leech
Yep.
Seed. Like, that's not the point. And
Yeah.
I'd kind of like to drop Leech Seed. I don't like that move.
Interesting.
But yeah, and so, oh my god, Celesteela was great. Like, there were games that got to 3 or even 4 attack boosts. Like, all these side spam teams that I played had no answers for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard Wolfe joking around after the tournament saying that his restricted Pokemon were Rayquaza and Celesteela. So I know that it was a really big part of your team. I think that was really cool to see.
It was. And I think part of that was because people aren't ready. But,
Mm-hmm.
and like during after I went 6-3 on the first day, I texted Wolf and I was like, man, I think we built a fine team. I don't think we built a good team. But, thinking back on it, that's a real good team.
Yeah, in hindsight.
and-
it won an international championship. I guess it's okay.
Yeah, I guess it's alright.
I guess it's alright.
So my complaint about the team is I never brought Gengar.
We were going to ask you about that.
Um,
I think I remember you saying at some point that you brought it like for the second time against the second time you played Caleb.
No. Yeah, I brought it for I brought it for the first time against Caleb the second day that I played, which I think is round 13.
Oh my god.
So that was the first game Gengar came to, and then the second game Gengar came to was in my very last match of the day. So that's 2 out of 35 games. I had a lot of game freeze. Not ideal. Can we do an off the mic bit for a second here? Edit this out?
Later.
Okay. Well, you'll have to edit that part out now. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I don't know what I do with the Gengar slot, but I also don't know if it should move. So, exciting times ahead.
Interesting. So that kind of brings us to our next, last sort of thing we want to talk about as far as NAIC goes is, would you carry this team forward, or are you looking elsewhere going into Worlds?
I think it's a good team. I'm definitely looking at some other stuff, and I don't want to say too much about that.
No, that's fine.
Right,
that's fine.
exactly.
But I think it's good, and I think I'd want to have answers for it if I were me and I were playing in the World Championships. I don't know how successful someone would be if they just took it and...
Yeah, they just picked it up, yeah.
Picked it up. A lot of my practice, something that I thought was kind of cool was I would watch Wolf's replays, and I would start them and stop them. And so I'd get to team preview, and I'd stop it, and I'd be like, what's he gonna do here? What do I think is good here and compare it to what he's gonna do here? And then I'd sort of see, oh, he did this. I wonder why he did that. Well, that's like this. And so it was kind of fun in the finals to, backseat game them. Because I was like, this is exactly what I would do. Actually,
so
it wasn't.
basically you were also the North American International Champion, is what you're saying.
I'd like to think that.
That's how that works. You had a hand in building, so naturally you also won.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll go with that.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for all of that, Aaron. Like we said with this podcast, what we really want to do is try and personalize the content that we bring you with our guest, and we're really excited this week to be able to feature the co-architect of the team, the team that won the North American International Championship.
Thank you.
So, Aaron, we also have a couple of other segments that we'd like to do with you here as we close up the podcast here.
I am ready. I'm so ready.
So the first one is, if you don't have anything prepared, that's totally fine. But we would really love it if you asked us a question.
Oh, I don't have anything prepared.
Okay, then we will move on to the next one.
I'm sorry. I actually asked one of my group chats for questions that I could ask you guys, and the answers that came back were not PG-13.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Maybe
we will
not.
pass. We will pass on from there. So the next segment that we would like to play here, and I do emphasize play, is that it is a game.
Wait.
And the game that we're playing this week is called Guess the Last Pokemon.
Wait.
Wait for what?
You're gonna have to do that intro again. I do have a question for you, but it involves a link.
It involves a what?
A link that you're gonna have to click.
That's fine.
So you might have to put this in the description of the podcast.
Okay.
Can I link it?
Go ahead. Yeah,
okay.
link it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's my question for you, and I've linked it in the Discord chat.
Okay.
Let me know.
Okay. What's the question?
Oh boy.
What is your opinion on the perceived nutritional value of candles? And to follow up, how do the scents compare to the taste?
Ooh.
Well, looking at the nutritional value, it does seem to be a pretty efficient source of protein, which is kind of interesting.
I would say the same.
Wow.
I'd never really considered candles to be a good source of protein, but as far as the scent, I feel like it's one of those things where it's like seltzer, where you smell it before you taste it, and I feel like the smell contributes more to the taste than the actual taste does.
Interesting. Huh.
I don't know.
I
I wish
never-
the candle I ate for breakfast this morning was this nutritional, because I think mine was all just sugar. I don't think it had any protein. It was really not very filling. I got like really energetic for like 5 minutes and then just immediately crashed.
Oh man. See, that's why you got to go for the organic brands.
I know. Next
The
time. I'm so
non-GMO
glad you were here to
non-GMO
enlighten us.
All right. So we're going to go into our next segment here, which is, like I alluded to before Aaron came up with, I'm not sure how anyone's ever going to top this question.
That was on the
but
spot too.
It is called Guess the Sixth Pokemon, and it is playing out about as you would expect it to. So what I've done here is I've pulled a couple of teams, some well-known, some not well-known, some a little normal, some less normal, from NAIC, from EUIC, and then from random PCs. And the goal of the game is that I haven't shown Jake any of this. Is I'm going to read you 5 Pokemon, and you have to guess the 6th Pokemon.
This is cyberbullying.
Okay, so the first team, some of these might be a little bit more well known, as NAIC is a little bit fresh, and we only have the top 64 to pull to. But we'll start out with Kyogre, Rayquaza, Gengar, Koko, and Incineroar.
Is this a trick question?
No,
This
it
is
could
not
be
a trick
any steel
question.
type. It could be any one of those.
My guess is Celesteela.
My guess
We
is
went with
Stakataka.
Celesteela here, as it was. There might have been a Stakataka team with that in the field, but Celesteela was what we were looking
Oh
for.
my god, I'm
here.
so smart.
I
And this
almost
one
had it.
here, a little bit less ambiguous. Kyogre, Lunala, Tapu Lele, Tapu Koko, and Nihilego.
Is it Mega Metachan?
It is Mega Metachan.
Aaron, I'm
okay?
smoking
Man,
you
I
right now.
had my finger on the buzzer.
And now that we're going to depart here from the finals of the tournament here. Rayquaza, Xerneas, Metagross, Tapu Fini, and Gastrodon.
And Mandibuzz.
And Mandibuzz.
Oh, yeah.
Javier
You're right,
Valdez
you're right.
with that
I lost
X-ray
to
team.
Javier.
I lost to it too. It was just a wild team.
Well, in EU, but I know the drill.
Oh, in EU, yeah, the
Yeah.
team. Okay, and this one
Yes.
I know Jake knows the answer to, so I'm going to direct it specifically to Aaron.
Oh,
Aaron,
no.
Groudon, Necrozma Duskmane, Tapu Lele, Stakataka, and Lilligant.
Oh, I've played this guy, Zoroark.
Oh, man, I thought
Sorry,
we
can't
were
you
I
asked
really
me
thought
all-
we had him
You
with that
asked
one.
me all the ones I know.
I really thought we had him with that one. Okay, we're going to touch on a couple of EUIC teams. So this is a little bit farther back. I think that maybe it'll be a little bit tougher.
Okay, yeah. a
So
little
the
harder
first
for
one
me.
is actually going to be a
Right.
5-mon team without one of the restricted Pokemon. So the 5 are Rayquaza, Tapu Fini, Incineroar, Raichu, and Ferrothorn.
Oh god.
That's definitely Xerneas, isn't it?
Wait, no.
It is not Xerneas, Jake.
Wow.
It can't be. It might be Ho-Oh.
It is Ho-Oh.
Oh, but, okay.
Is
Okay.
that
Aaron with the good one. All right, and the last EUIC team that we're going to do here, Xerneas, Lunala, Persian, Gastrodon, and Amoonguss.
Can you repeat the team?
Xerneas, Lunala, Persian, Gastrodon, and Amoonguss.
Is it Landorus Therian?
It is not Landorus Therian.
Is it Stakataka?
It is not Stakataka. The answer to this one is Blaziken. Blaziken is the 6th Pokemon.
That place above me? What place did that
Obviously.
finish?
Obviously, Blaziken is the last one. Okay, and
What place did that finish?
I don't know. I'd have to look.
Oh my god.
It got CP.
Wow.
All right, so these last few that I've got here for you guys are just kind of random from PCs over the course of early Ultra Series. Shout out to Zach and VGC Stats. So the first one is a pretty well-known team that ended up placing at a bunch of events all over the world, with the 5 being Rayquaza, Tapu Lele, Incineroar, Stakataka, and Kartana.
What? This is Ultra Series?
This is Ultra Series.
Can you say the other Pokemon again?
Rayquaza, Tapu Lele, Incineroar, Stakataka, and Kartana.
Who would build such a team?
That is the question, isn't it, Aaron?
Is it Kyogre?
It is not Kyogre.
Xerneas?
Oh.
It is not Xerneas either.
Yeah.
The answer is Palkia. Palkia is the
Dear Lord.
answer. That's the team that Bingji and I think Yihui were also using it at events early in Ultra Series.
I was such a fool.
Okay, this next one is pulled directly from a PC in Uruguay. Rayquaza, Kyogre, Nihilego, Incineroar, and Tornadus.
The last one has got to be some weird electric type, like Xurkitree.
It's not an electric type. I'll give you that hint.
Is it Kartana?
But is it Xurkitree?
It is not Kartana.
No.
Aaron, your guess is Xurkitree?
Well, you said it was an electric type, but
It
you
is
didn't answer
not
the other.
Xurkitree, Aaron. You're wrong. The answer is Swampert. Mega Swampert is the last Pokemon.
That was actually what I was going to say next.
I'll take your word for it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the next one, I think we'll make this the last one here, is
Thank
a
you.
well-known builder, and you might get an idea of maybe what the last Pokemon is if you have an idea of the team-building tendencies of this one player. The 5 are Rayquaza, Xerneas, Ditto, Bisharp, and Salazzle.
Excadrill.
Oh.
It's
Me-
Excadrill!
Yes!
Oh, Jake nails
I was
the
gonna
boy
say Mega
combo at the
Alakazam.
end there.
Another good guess.
Right person, wrong Pokemon.
Yeah.
Right person, wrong Pokemon.
All right, Aaron, this leads us into our last question for you of this podcast.
Oh, no.
This is a
Oh,
really
no.
important question.
Oh,
Given that
gosh.
you are the friendship master and the bastion of friendship in this community, I need you to rank the following Pokemon in order of friendliness. Are you ready?
Oh, no. Oh,
These Pokemon
they're all my
are...
friends.
They're
Okay.
not. I thought about doing that, but I thought that would be too mean. These Pokemon
Okay.
are Bronzong, Celesteela, Ferrothorn, Stakataka, and Aegislash.
Oh my god. Well, God. So my metric is friendliness.
Friendliness, yeah.
Okay. Well, you can't be friends with Pokemon because they're inanimate objects.
Okay.
No, you can't take that soundbite out of context. Wow. I mean, like, I guess it's pretty obvious, but I guess I have to go with Bronzong first. That's like, you
Okay.
can't ever walk back on a homie like that.
Right,
Um,
of course.
It was actually pretty good for me in early Ultra, and then I guess I have to go Celesteela because, yeah. You know what I realized with Wolf, like, way too late, is like my meme in 2016 was Bell Yeah, but for Celesteela
Yep.
we could have had Cell Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then after that, you know, Aegislash and Stakataka, I like them a lot, but I think Ferrothorn is the worst. It's an ugly
I
Pokemon.
agree with you. Yep, 100%.
Yeah, but thank you. So I guess, to reiterate, my friends in order would be Bronzong, number 1, Celesteela, number 2, Aegislash, number 3, and Stacky, number 4, and then Ferrothorn, number 5.
Yeah,
There
I
you
mean,
have
like,
it.
what kind of friend
was a
can you be
great-
if you can't hug someone without poking them? You know?
That's right. Well, I mean, counterpoint, all Pokemon are our friends, and you should
Right.
give even the pokey ones love.
Except Ferrothorn.
That's right.
The other Pokemons, that's fine. But
Yeah.
that was actually a really good selection, Jake. I'm really pleased
Yeah, that was
you.
pretty
with
good.
what you
That
did
was
there.
solid.
Okay.
I do my best.
Yeah.
And the last segment we're going to do with you here, Aaron, and this was another thing that I did ask you to prepare, so hopefully you're ready this time, is on Soundproof here, we would like to give music recs at the end of all of our podcasts here, as it is, you know, appropriately thematic with our sound-based thing. And also, Jake and I feel like one of the things that when we became good friends over was like a shared
Yeah.
mutual music taste.
It's like every other day we say, oh, listen to this.
Yeah.
Okay,
So, Aaron,
well, I
I'm
did
gonna let you go
believe
ahead.
I would tell you, and I'm going to scroll through our chat log, but I think I
You
did
did.
tell
I know
you
exactly what you're going to say.
that I
Yep.
was going to recommend Baby Shark. but I would like to read.
Why did we ask Aaron to be on this podcast?
And I could even sing it for you if you want.
I think we're good. I don't think we have the rights to that.
No.
We would have to pay a lot of
serious
money.
answers. Wolf and I did name all of our Pokemon after Lizzo Pokemon. Lizzo songs.
Mhm.
And so you could pick one of those. But my personal
I'm a fan.
DL favorite is Marble Skies by Django.
Ooh, I don't think
And
I've
you can
actually
Google
heard
that.
of that, so I'm gonna type that.
It's pretty
in.
good, and it's kind of Ryogre themed. So,
I like that.
You know,
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
it's an indie hit.
Mine would be the album Nothing Happens by the band Wallows. If you
Nice.
know who Dylan Minnette is, I think that's his last name.
Now, I don't. I'm really bad with like
That's
celebrities.
fine.
and
He's an
names and
actor,
stuff,
and
but
he's
I'll
also
look
the
them
front
up.
man of this band, and I like it a lot.
Nice.
The band is Wallows. Album Nothing Happens. If you want one song, probably Treacherous Doctor. That's a fun song.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Yay.
And mine is going to be drifting somewhat more mainstream here after events today that were very near and dear to my heart. I'm a big Taylor Swift stan.
Oh yeah.
And if you, I'm not going to get into it, but basically some unfortunate happenings occurred to her on, as a result of a sale of the company that her first 6 albums belong to. So I would really just like to recommend that you go back and listen to some of Taylor Swift's older stuff.
Brendan, I
Okay,
think you
my
really
personal-
need to calm down right now.
My personal favorite album, I'm going to ignore that one for your sake, Jake. My personal favorite album is Fearless, and of course, if you want a song, just go straight back to the Radio Top 40 and listen to You Belong With Me.
Good one.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Brendan.
All right,
I
so
will
we're going to
listen
wrap
to
up
all
our
of those for
segment
sure.
with Aaron here. Aaron, thanks so much
Yes,
for joining
thank
us. We
you.
really
Yeah, thanks for having
appreciate
me.
the insight that you can bring us. And again, I'm going to keep harping on this, is we really want personalized content from our guests, and we nailed it here with a lot of on-brand comments from Aaron, and of course, being able to talk to him about the NAIC winning team that, of course, he was the co-architect on. So, Aaron, any closing thoughts for our listeners here?
No, keep being you.
Keep being it's
Aw.
on-brand content.
You'll
as
always
we-
be my friend.
That's adorable.
on.
I love you.
Thanks, Aaron. On-brand content.
Thank you, but I'm taken. I'm not actually.
Ladies.
No, thank you guys so much for having me.
Awesome.
I had a
Thanks
lot
for
of fun.
coming, Aaron.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, and
problem.
if our podcast survives another 3-4 years, maybe we'll get the opportunity to bring you on again.
You should probably just wait until late August, because I might have some
After
more
you win
things for you
Worlds.
then.
Oh, someone's confident.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, thanks again, Aaron.
Okay, peace out, Girl Scouts.
Thank you all so much for listening, assuming you made it this far, to the inaugural episode of Soundproof Podcast. Jake and I were really excited that we're finally got this thing off the ground, and we had a super good first guest. And if you guys, again, are still listening, thank you all so much for giving us the opportunity to make this podcast. And hopefully the content was to your liking. If you have any comments, any concerns, or you just really love to feed our egos, like, by all means, sound off on Twitter. Let us know what you think so that we can try and adapt this to something that is really enjoyable for the whole community.
Yeah, as Brendan said, thank you to everyone who listened. Massive thanks to Aaron for coming on and talking to us for a little while. Again, thanks to Smogon user AmirAlexander for the amazing art, and thank you
Absolutely.
to everyone that listened. We all had a good time. You can catch us on Twitter at SoundproofCast. We will be tweeting, when we upload episodes, when we have updates or questions for you guys as the audience. And the best way to keep up with the podcast would be to follow us on Twitter.
Awesome. So I think that does it for us here from the pilot episode of Soundproof Podcast. And until then, we will see you guys in 2 weeks.